IMCC 1789. Here's my next response.
In regards to your question of whether capitalist's goal is really the greatest accumulation for a few, while they may not have the personal goal, this is how it works out, as can be plainly seen.
No, it can be plainly seen that the current state of the world, which involves mixed economies and lots of states, results in large disparities of resources and income. That says nothing about what would result from anarchism of either a capitalist or a socialist stripe.
Furthermore, to say this desire is not felt by many, if not most, seems naive at best.
It seems naive to you because you are convinced that capitalism logically requires the state. But I believe that many socialists want things that would logically require the state, and those things that would logically require the state are what they consider core principles. If these socialists are also anarchists, then they have logically contradictory positions. I don't, however, ascribe bad motives to these people. That, I think, would be naive.
I do not know that anarcho-capitalists don't generally have this goal, whether they do or not.
In other words, you don't know whether the goal of anarcho-capitalists is the greatest accumulation for a few or not. So, maybe you should be particularly careful to avoid accusing us of that.
As to public versus private natures of presently existing states, it seems you have exactly summarized my point. We differ merely on the fact that states do not seem to have ever been public, but set up by private interests. Of course there's a public nature, but at the essential core they are run by such interests.
I actually agree that states are always set up by private interests, but it's always with that public nature that you admit is there. If it weren't for the claim that they somehow represent or rightly rule over everybody in a geographic region, it wouldn't be a state. It would simply be a private organization of some kind. That's what distinguishes states from all other human organizations.
With your joint venture, is there true partnership of labor or just renting to him? This would change things if that is the case.
Well, obviously, if I'm renting it to him, then all I ought to care about is that he not damage my property, not put my children in danger, etc. He gets to keep any and all profit that he makes from his work if he's actually paying me for the use of the machine. However, if I'm paying him for his labor and expertise, then maybe I can keep the profit. It just depends on what agreement he and I work out.
Regarding police, courts, and military again, of course some people will advocate capitalist enterprises. If the state no longer exists, in anarchy, capitalism must as well have disappeared.
No, that's not true. Under the capitalist version of anarchy, capitalism doesn't disappear. However, I am initially assuming the socialist version of anarchy, so we can proceed under that assumption.
Therefore, it seems unlikely most would support this. Ones who did, well, you can probably guess who that might be.
Yes, obviously, those would be people who don't have a problem with private property and the profit motive. That's actually irrelevant, though. The point is, there would be some people like that. Those people would set up private defense organizations based on the profit motive. Some of them would operate the organization, some of them would be customers.
As for how it would be prevented, as before, I said by the consciousness that would have to exist for this anarchy to occur, with refusal of it.
But we already agreed that obviously there would be some people who don't refuse it. Those people who don't refuse it would be willing to be customers and or to set it up. So you still haven't answered the question. How would it be prevented?
Although you object to mercenary, this seems accurate.
It depends entirely on what you mean by mercenary. If you mean a force that sells its services to the highest bidder without regard to ethics, then no, I absolutely do not advocate that. Nor does anybody else. If, on the other hand, you mean a force that is profit motivated, then yes, I do advocate that.
While they may care about ethics, by definition, if these are capitalist enterprises, they sell their services for the highest bidders.
I used to run a computer bulletin board system, and I was approached by someone who offered to tell me where I could find stolen credit card information. I turned him down flat for ethical reasons. In other words, ethics matters. It matters to me, it matters to you, it matters to most people. You're right that some people don't care about ethics at all, but those people are called psychopaths and would be unlikely to get in a position to run a private defense organization. People who care less about ethics tend to be more short-sighted and are less likely than others to get into that position. Now, I agree it might happen, but there's no prearranged monopoly, so other defense organizations would probably form a coalition to defeat the aggressor. Regarding democratically organized police, defense, and courts, you said,
they would not actively prohibit such private institutions, but defend against them if necessary.
Excellent! Then your ideal socialist anarchist society would not prohibit the existence of capitalist enterprises. People would just defend themselves if attacked by them, and that is as it should be.
My problem is not that you can't fight back. It's that you seem to be forgetting if such institutions answer to the highest bidders, the need to defend yourself will become inevitable.
Sorry, my friend, but the need to defend yourself is inevitable anyway. Regarding theft, you said,
possession is not legitimate where it comes by force, unless this is, as we are discussing, retrieved from a thief.
Great! So again, we are in agreement that possessions can be properly held or improperly held. Those that are properly held are called property. That's what the word property means. It's obviously misused a lot by people like kings, but that does not invalidate the very concept of property or private property.
We agree on the fact that police, courts, and military could be democratically set up by people, though not without the consent of all government. I agree that opposing this without such consent, overcoming resistance, would make them a state.
Great! We're agreeing on so many things. And yet, if somebody thinks I am a socialist, I cringe. And I'm sure you cringe if somebody thinks you're a capitalist.
I'm glad you agree with my point that anarchy would be an improvement, but not perfect.
I'm not sure why you think that's your point, but of course I agree with it. Anarchists of all flavors, whether capitalist or socialist or whatever, agree on that.
One last point. You didn't respond to my question about use of force by a court that has been set up democratically. What about criminal law? Some anarchists of all tendencies say no, doubtless because we dislike such governmental acts. The possibility of abuse is as ever present. For instance, a town which might arrest passers-by on a flimsy charge for bail, fines, bribes, etc. Could they enforce their will on a person who has not consented to it?
It's a sad fact that many criminals get away with their crimes, and although I think anarchism of any stripe would be better than what we have now, it's not a magic pill that automatically prevents things like this.
Or is it their ignorance of the law? No excuse.
If we take the idea that ignorance of the law is no excuse to its logical conclusion, then the people in power could pass any law they want and use it to enslave people for life. Clearly, that's a ridiculous position to take.
In general, would such institutions have the right to use force when not in an immediate response to aggression? For instance, like I said, enforcing judgments?
Well, I think they probably would, but it depends on how things evolve in the free market.
If, for instance, there is oppression the next village over, can a democratic militia go liberate inhabitants that ask for help?
It doesn't matter if it's democratic or not. I think helping to free oppressed people is always okay. But again, the free market would decide that.
Or suppose they will not or cannot ask for help. Can they liberate them even then?
Same answer. The free market would decide that. I think that some people in the oppressed village would want to be free, and as I said, I think helping to free them is always okay.